Venezuela's Minister of Defense Vladimir Padrino Lopez described as successful the actions taken to counteract the advance of the Colombian armed terrorist drug trafficking groups known as TANCUL. Honduras President Xiomara Castro stopped the eviction of about 100 Lincoln indigenous families who are fighting private owners over their ancestral lands. The President of the U.S. signed an executive order on Friday invoking emergency powers to consolidate and freeze $7 billion of the total assets held by the Afghan Central Bank in New York. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuela's Minister of Defense, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, described as successful the actions taken to counteract the advances of the Colombian armed terrorist drug trafficking group known as TANCUL. The high military official confirmed in a balance sheet that at least 9 individuals have been neutralized and another 50 arrested during the security operations against criminal groups in the border areas with Colombia. Padrino Lopez reiterated the accusations against the Colombian government led by Iván Duque for supporting and financing these extremist groups that seeks to destabilize the country. He also informed that 16 facilities have been dismantled which have been used for illicit purposes such as kidnappings, preparation of explosive devices, and drug processing. The Minister of Defense also reiterated the U.S. involvement with the paramilitary groups that operates in Central America and other regions in the world.
It is well known the United States has used these paramilitary groups in different parts of the world, in Vietnam, China, Afghanistan. It supported with drug trafficking the contrast against the National Sandinista revolution right here in Central America. Why not do it in Venezuela? So I want the people of Venezuela to understand the great spectrum of this phenomenon of drug trafficking that is not limited only and exclusively to trafficking. It is a geopolitical issue we have to pay attention to, that we have to pay a lot of attention to it.
The Minister of Defense, Vladimir Padrino Lopez, also exposed from data from international organizations explaining how much money gets laundered in Colombia and how that money perpetrates the whole of the nation.
According to DEA information, over $10,000 million are laundered in Colombia. This is DEA. Imagine the amount of money that runs into the national Colombian territory and how far it can get, and how to believe that it does not touch institutions, judges, president, the military, policemen, etc. It is deplorable, the situation in Colombia.
The 36th General Assembly of the Latin America and the Caribbean Parliament began in Panama this Friday, with the COVID-19 pandemic as the main focus of the debates. The Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Alicia Bárcena, gave a conference on the economic, social, and cultural impacts of the pandemic in Latin America. Likewise, Chilean Senator Jorge Pizarro, who is due to finish his term as president of the organization, offered a report about the activities of the Parlatinos organizations. On these occasions, the activity was the setting for the election of a new board of directors as well as the advisory council for the period 2022-2024. In Argentina, after the support received by the governments of China and Russia to the agreement reached by the administration of President Alberto Fernández with the International Monetary Fund for the foreign debt taken by the government of Mauricio Macri, the National Congress is preparing to deal with the understanding from Buenos Aires. Our correspondent Carolina Silvestre with more details.
Presidential spokeswoman Gabriela Cerruti confirmed that heads of state Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping approved the path taken by Argentina to advance in the agreement with the International Monetary Fund. It was very important for all of us and for Argentina, both the visit to Russia and the visit to China. We are in a multilateral world that is now everyone understands. Even the U.S. government understands it. Even the director of the International Monetary Fund, who has just met with stylists and said that this is the multilateral world we have to bet on. Diplomatic relations in the world are based on this new view of the multilateral world, and without excluding anyone from international conversations and the research for global economy that is a bit more equitable and just. At the press conference given by Cerruti at the Casa Rosada, she also informed that as soon as the agreement reaches the parliament, it will begin to be processed. She also acknowledged the differences within the ruling party. Regarding the conversations between the president, the vice president, the deputy Maximo Kirchner, the president of the chamber Sergio Massa, there are conversations that take place on a regular basis and with all the ministers. And they are part of the usual debate within a government coalition that sometimes has differences and different views on some points, but that reaches deep understanding and in which everyone has a deep vocation for unity. The executive body is certain that the agreement will be ratified by Parliament. We believe in the word of the President of the Chamber of Deputies, who just said last night that it would be approved without major difficulty, and the tools are the tools that are used in any legislative debate. The debate, the persuasion, the reasoning to try to make us understand that in this world, the agreement we have reached with the International Monetary Fund is the best possible agreement, as recognized by international governments and even by those who are in very different ideological political situations from us. For its part, Macri's party, or the political force that acquired the debt, that Argentina is currently negotiating with the fund for $45 billion, has not yet defined whether it will support the agreement with the financing organization.
If we do not implement a new agreement on the debt contracted by the previous government, we would have to pay $18 billion this year because the Macri agreement is still in force, which means that all these projects that have to do with incentivizing, with giving up tax collection, with promoting investment, with subsidizing rates, would be delayed because the Argentine state would have to pay $18 billion coming due on the debt contracted by Macri.
With the open-ended outcome of the congressional vote, the investments announced by Russia and China and possible financing become more relevant.
Carolina Silvestre, teleSUR, Buenos Aires.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The eviction of 100 Lenca indigenous families in Honduras has stopped at the request of President Xiomara Castro after dozens of police officers tried to remove them. Police arrived at Tierra del Padre, a piece of land 10 kilometers south of the capital Tegucigalpa, with a judge and an eviction order stating the site belongs to a private individual. According to local media, reports that 200 hectares property is claimed by a businessman who intends to build 10,000 homes in the land. A representative of the indigenous community said they have a deed registering ownership of the land dated back to 1739. The country's ministers for human rights, Natalia Roque, and President Advisor Pedro Armador arrived in the scene on the order of the head of state to stop the eviction from happening. Both representatives added that the government was committed to defending the rights of the most vulnerable population. There are celebrations in the Department of Colón, Northern Honduras, as the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice has decided to release the 6 environmentalists in prison since 2019. Only on Wednesday, the court ruled against these leaders whose only crime was to oppose a mining project known as Guapinol, but hours later, the Constitutional Chamber was ordered to grant an appeal in favor of the 8 defendants, 2 of whom were released on Wednesday. The Public Prosecutor's Office accused them of being part of a violent group that allegedly set fire to several containers belonging to the company Inversiones Pinares in September 2018.
We are here from the Committee of Common and Public Goods, the families, the lawyers, and all the organizations, families and people who have been following this case. We are happy because at last we are going to be able to have our companions with their families. We are going to be able to bring them to Olanchito and bring them to their families. Yes, we could. And this is very important because this process was not something that this court that was in charge of this case decided. This tribunal, these judges, who were in charge of this trial. Today, justice was finally imposed, although late.
The Russian government regretted the lack of progress in the recent meeting of Normandy quarters on the crisis in Ukraine after almost 9 hours of negotiations. The deputy head of the Russian presidential administration, Dmitry Kozak, noted the negotiations between the political advisors of the Quarter of Russia, France, Germany, and Ukraine have not yielded results, nor have differences over the Minsk agreement been overcome. However, he noted that Russia saw no signs of willingness on the part of the French and German authorities to put pressure on Ukraine to comply with the agreements. China on Friday slammed the U.S. for attempts to suppress and contain the country's development after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized Beijing's behavior in the Indo-Pacific region.
Aims to discredit, suppress, and contain China's development by hyping the China's threats. This fully exposes its deep-rooted Cold War thinking and ideological bias. We firmly reject the relevant U.S. statement. The so-called Quad alliance between the U.S., Japan, India, and Australia is in essence a tool to contain China and maintain U.S. hegemony. It is artificially provoking confrontation and undermining international solidarity and cooperation. China has no interest and has never interfered in Australia's internal affairs. We urge the individual Australian politician and institution to stop making an issue of China.
At least 130 tons of U.S. military cargo arrived in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, on Friday, and tensions with Russia over an alleged intervention in the country's military. The Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov said in a statement that with the arrival of these 2 aircraft, Ukraine has already received a total of 15 ships with military aid weighing over 1,000 tons. At present, the members of the state of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization are still supplying arms and training their military in Ukraine, actions which contradict the Minsk agreements and hinder the solution of the conflict in the Donbass. Shifting topics, protesters gathered at outside New Zealand Parliament on Friday as police escalated back efforts to clear anti-vaccine demonstrators involved in violent clashes a day early. The festive mood that prevailed at the gathering was a stark contrast to the fire scenes witnesses on Thursday when officers attempts to evict protesters, arresting 122 people and using pepper spray to contain the demonstrators. Activists have been camped on the lands of Parliament for 4 days in a protest that began on Tuesday as a copycat of freedom convoy actions by Canadian truckers in Ottawa. The New Zealand's required mandatory COVID vaccinations for people working in sectors such as health, law enforcement, education, and defense, with those who refuse to jab facing the sack. Proof of vaccinations must also be shown to enter restaurants, sport events, and religious scenarios. Trucker-led protests against coronavirus restrictions in Canada shut down another U.S. border crossing. Similar movements gathered steam overseas. The protesters have shut down central Ottawa for 14 days, trying to force the government to lift COVID-19 health regulations. The Freedom Convoy began in last month in Western Canada, launched in anger at requirements that truckers either be vaccinated or test and isolate when crossing the U.S.-Canada border. The border obstructions have already impacted business, with the key ambassador bridge linking Ontario and Detroit out of services for several days, and major automakers forced to cut back production at several plants as a result. In the meantime, in the capital, police were bringing in reinforcements, issuing more arrests and tickets, and stepping up truck-downing operations in a bid to break the impasse that has paralyzed the city. We'll take a final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The President of the U.S., Joe Biden, signed an executive order on Friday invoking emergency powers to consolidate and freeze all $7 billion of the total asset the Afghan Central Bank keep in New York. The order was discussed as a way to split the Afghan frozen reserve between humanitarian efforts for the Afghan people and American victims of terrorism, including relatives of the September 11. The highly unusual set of moves is supposedly meant to address a tangle not of legal, political, foreign policy and humanitarian problems stemming from the attacks and the end of the 20-year war in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the economy of the South Asian country has been collapsing, leading to a mass starvation that is in turn creating an enormous destabilizing new wave of refugees and raising a clear need for extensive spending on humanitarian relief. The Taliban movement, currently under UN sanctions for terrorist activities, described for the U.S. decisions to leave Afghanistan's central bank funds in New York as FTS. The official spokesman for the Taliban's political officer, Mohammad Naim, said on Friday, before the Taliban came to power, $7 billion belonging to the African Central Bank bags stored in the U.S. city, and on Friday, President Joe Biden signed a decree that these funds will be deposited in an account in New York and divided equally between September 11 victims and humanitarian aid for Afghanistan. Attacks by suspect Islamic extremists in northern Benin have killed at least 9 people, including army soldiers, park rangers, and a French instructor. A government spokesman confirmed the information and said that 1,000 people were injured as well in the ambush that occurred on Tuesday, which included explosions from improvised landmines on a patrol of parks rangers of the north of the WH National Park near the border of neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger. The rangers were part of an anti-poaching patrol working with African Parks, the international organization that manages several parks on the continent, including the WH National Park. Reinforcements from the Benin Armed Forces have been deployed to the area, and African Parks is working with the government to assure its staff and surrounding civilian communities. In Kenya, a delegation of FAO met with local farmers during a visit from 6 to 9 February. Top officials from the UN Food and Agricultural Organization just completed a visit to Kenya to raise awareness of the drought and see FAO's vital response in action. FAO's Deputy Director General Beth Bechdol, who led the delegation, praised the opportunity of assessing firsthand the work of the organization on the region, as well as to understand the difficulties faced by the country with the ongoing drought and its impacts on population. According to FAO, an extended drought is driving acute food insecurity and the Horn of Africa, with 12 to 14 million people now at risk of crop continue to weather and animals weaken.
So we are here for a short period of time, only 3 to 4 days, and it's an opportunity for us, as I said, to really understand the work that we have done to successfully beat back the desert locust, but now, most importantly, to really assess firsthand the issues that are being faced by the country with the ongoing drought, the continued climate shocks, and the very important impacts that are facing the livestock industry in particular, the pastoralists, the farmers in the rural communities, and the ASALs that are most impacted by these challenges.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. From Telesur English, I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching.